Animals aren't permitted past this checkpoint. The young officer didn't even look up when he said it. He saw the dog first, then the girl. Long dark hair loose past her shoulders, cargo pants, an olive green sports top, and he made his call before she opened her mouth. He thought he was doing his job. He had no idea he was making the biggest mistake of his entire career. Because 20 minutes later, 3 black government vehicles would tear onto that base. A SEAL commander would step out, look at the tattoo on her forearm, and go completely still. Like a man staring at something that wasn't supposed to be alive. Before we show you what he saw, drop a comment right now telling us what city you're watching from. Tap like, hit subscribe, and turn that bell on. Because what happens at that gate doesn't stay at that gate. The gate at Naval Special Warfare Training Facility Echo wasn't built to intimidate. It didn't need to be. The checkpoint itself did the work. 2 lanes, 3 cameras, 1 officer per line, and a scanner that beeped green for the right people and red for everyone else. Families in pressed clothes and sensible shoes moved through the first lane without any trouble. They had wristbands, printed invitations, and the relaxed confidence of people who had been told they were welcome. Today was a graduation. Canine handlers and their dogs completing the most demanding working animal program in the United States military. The bleachers were already filling. The flags were already flying. Everything was exactly how it was supposed to be. Until the second lane. Cassidy Marin didn't slow down when she reached the checkpoint. She walked like she already knew the layout of everything beyond it, the field, the platform, the position of the sun at this hour. She was 22 years old. Her dark brown hair fell loose past her shoulders, and she wore an olive green sports top with a deep neckline, military camouflage cargo pants, and boots that had seen more actual ground than anything issued to the 2 officers currently watching her approach. Beside her, on a leash held loosely in her left hand, walked Rex. Adult German Shepherd, tan and black coat, amber eyes that moved like they were doing calculations. He didn't sniff the air. He didn't scan the crowd. He walked in perfect heel, 1 step behind her left knee. Not because she was pulling him there, but because that was where he always was. Petty Officer Bryce Sutton saw them coming from 30 feet out. He was young enough that his confidence was still borrowed, worn like a uniform that hadn't broken in yet. He stepped into the center of the lane and raised 1 hand. "Ma'am, this checkpoint is for invited personnel and verified handler units only. Pets aren't permitted past this point." Cassidy stopped. Rex stopped with her, sitting immediately without a word from her, eyes forward, ears at attention. "He's not a pet," she said. Sutton looked at Rex the way someone looks at a car they're not impressed by. "Still can't come through. Do you have a printed invitation and a current handler credential?" Cassidy reached into the side pocket of her cargo pants and pulled out a folded card. She handed it over without hurry. Sutton unfolded it. The credential was real. The material was heavy, official-grade laminate. The crest was genuine. But there was no barcode on the back, no digital authentication strip. The font was the kind that hadn't been used on standard issue since before Sutton had entered training. He turned it over twice, flipped it again, and looked up. "This doesn't have a QR tag." "It doesn't need one," she said. "Everything current issue has a digital marker, ma'am. That credential isn't current issue." Sutton's expression shifted just slightly. Not suspicion yet. Something closer to impatience. "Then I can't verify it here. I need you to step to secondary screening." He glanced down at Rex's harness, olive drab, worn smooth at the chest and shoulders, and a patch near the left plate that showed a faded insignia. A German Shepherd silhouette layered over a dagger, 3 small dots arranged in a tight triangle beneath it. "And your dog's harness isn't standard for any canine unit I'm familiar with. Then you haven't been familiar with the right units, Cassidy said. Sutton smiled the way people do when they think they're being patient. Secondary screening, ma'am. Step to the left, please. Rex didn't move until Cassidy did. When she turned left, he turned left. One stride behind, measured and smooth. Behind them, the line kept moving. The secondary screening tent was cooler than the checkpoint lane and noticeably less friendly. A folding table, 2 security techs behind laptops, and a handheld scanner that chirped red the moment it touched Rex's chip plate. K9 designation, the first tech muttered, reading the screen. Wraith 1. Unit program. Classified. Access. Restricted above base commander level. He frowned and read it again. Decommissioned status. 2021. Try the invitation code, Cassidy said. It was issued directly through Commander Cole's office. The tech typed. Waited. The screen returned a pending flag and a verification request that needed a higher access tier to resolve. He set the scanner down. It's not resolving at this level. We're going to need to hold your access. Sutton stepped into the tent behind them, shoulders squared. He had that look now, the one that said the system had confirmed his first instinct. Ma'am, I want to be straightforward with you. We see this a few times every graduation cycle. Someone finds an old credential, attaches a working dog to it, shows up hoping the ceremony atmosphere will carry them through. The K9 unit today is an elite graduation. It's not a public exhibit. Cassidy turned and looked at him, not with heat, with the particular stillness of someone who has been looked at wrong by much harder people than this. Say that again, she said. I'm saying that decommissioned credentials, paired with non-standard animals, are a pattern we recognize. You're saying I forged it. Sutton didn't answer that directly. He looked down at her forearm instead, where her sleeve had shifted back with the motion of turning. The tattoo was visible now, small and deliberate on the inside of her forearm. A German shepherd silhouette, a dagger, 3 dots in a triangle, identical to the patch on Rex's harness. Sutton studied it for a moment, then looked back up. Interesting ink. Don't, Cassidy said. I'm just noting that people get tattoos for all kinds of reasons. That tattoo, she said, her voice dropping 1 register, quieter but sharper, is the reason 3 of your current K9 instructors on that field still have both their hands. The tent went quiet enough to hear the wind snap the fabric above them. Sutton opened his mouth. Then Chief Raymond Harker stepped inside, and the oxygen in the room changed. Harker was built like a man who had replaced rest with discipline for 20 years. Sunburned at the nose and neck, arms that looked like they belonged on equipment, not paper. He took the credential card from the tech and read it the way someone reads a document they already know is wrong. Handler designation Shade, he read. K9 Wraith 1. He set the card down flat on the table. Program it lists here doesn't have an active directory. The unit designation hasn't appeared on any base roster since before either of my gate officers were enlisted. He looked at Cassidy directly. So let's stop the performance, ma'am. What are you actually here for? Rex's ear rotated. Not toward Harker, toward the open tent flap, toward the field beyond. Cassidy didn't look away from Harker. I'm here because I was invited, and because Rex deserves to see what he helped build. Harker picked up the card again, then set it back down harder. A decommissioned dog doesn't attend a ceremony. A handler with credentials that won't scan doesn't get through my gate. That's not disrespect. That's procedure. Your procedure, Cassidy said evenly, doesn't know what it's looking at. Harker leaned forward on the table. Then explain it to me. And before she could answer, Before anyone in that tent could say another word, a voice came from the tent entrance. Quiet, careful, like someone who wasn't sure they were allowed to speak. "That patch." Everyone turned. Master Chief Diana Voss stood just inside the opening. She was there for the graduation, nothing more, wearing civilian clothes and holding a visitor lanyard. But she wasn't looking at Cassidy. She wasn't looking at Harker or Sutton or the tech with the dead scanner. She was looking at Rex's harness with an expression that made the air feel different in a way none of them could name. Her voice came out again, barely above a whisper. "That's Wraith 1. Sutton exhaled. "Ma'am, I need you to step back outside." Voss didn't move. Her eyes finally pulled away from Rex and landed on Cassidy. Something passed between them. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. The kind that doesn't need explanation because the people sharing it already lived through whatever explanation would require. "Voss," Cassidy said. One word, like a door opening that had been sealed a long time. Voss looked at her for 3 full seconds. Then she pulled out her phone, turned away from the tent, and started walking fast toward the command building. Not running, but close. Sutton watched her go. What is happening? Rex turned his head toward the main field. His amber eyes tracked something past the fence line, something none of the officers in that tent could see. Cassidy looked at Sutton. "You should call your commander," she said, "before he hears it from someone else." Sutton's radio crackled. He reached for it out of reflex. What came back through the static wasn't a question. It was a single, clipped instruction in a voice that didn't belong to any shift supervisor on the base that morning. "Do not move them. I'm 2 minutes out." Sutton stared at his radio like it had just spoken a language he hadn't been trained in. The voice on the other end was gone, the channel back to static. But the instructions sat in the air of that tent like something physical. "Do not move them. 2 minutes out." He looked at Harker. Harker looked at the radio. Neither of them spoke for a moment that lasted longer than it should have. "Who was that?" Sutton finally said. Harker didn't answer. He was already moving to the tent entrance, pulling it open just enough to look toward the main access road. His jaw tightened. He let the flap fall back. "Get the secondary gate closed," he said quietly to the tech nearest the door. "Nobody else in or out until I say." The tech moved fast. Sutton turned back to Cassidy, and whatever confidence he'd walked in with had developed a crack down the middle. He was trying not to show it. He wasn't doing well. "You want to tell me what's happening?" he said. Cassidy was crouched beside Rex, her hand resting flat on his back. Not petting him, just contact. The kind that meant something between the two of them that had nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with communication. "Someone finally ran the right search," she said without looking up. Rex pressed his shoulder slightly into her knee. She stood. Sutton stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, if I made a call I shouldn't have, I'll own that. But you need to tell me right now what unit designation Shade actually is, because nothing I have access to is showing me anything." "That's the point," Cassidy said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're cleared for." Sutton's expression went from cracked to something closer to rattled. He opened his mouth again, and Harker cut him off from across the tent, voice firm and flat. "Sutton, stop talking." Sutton stopped. He stood there with his hands at his sides, in the particular stillness of someone who has run out of moves and knows it. The tent went quiet. Rex remained seated. His amber eyes tracked the tent entrance without urgency, without fear, the way a trained animal tracks an environment it has already mapped and filed. He wasn't nervous. He was waiting. There was a difference, and everyone in that tent felt it, even if they couldn't name it. Then the sound came. Not sirens, not horns. Just tires on pavement, moving too fast and too coordinated to be anything casual. 3 vehicles, close together, pulling up just outside. Harker straightened without realizing he'd done it. Sutton's hand went to his belt out of reflex, found nothing useful there, and dropped back to his side. The tent flap opened. Commander Adrian Cole stepped inside. He was not a large man in the way that demanded attention through size. He was the kind of large that came from compression, from years of turning pressure into precision. His uniform sat on him like a second skeleton. His eyes moved the same way Rex's did, fast, cataloging, settling. He looked at Harker first, then Sutton, then the tech by the scanner. His expression said he had already been briefed, and the briefing had not improved his mood. Then he looked at Rex. He stopped walking. Not the polite pause of a man being careful. A full stop. Like something in his chest had caught on something in the room, and neither was moving until the other one acknowledged it. Rex looked back at him, calm, absolute, like a door that had been closed a long time and was now simply open again. Cole's eyes moved from Rex to the harness patch, the dagger, the silhouette, the 3 dots. His jaw shifted once. Then he looked at Cassidy. She was watching him the way someone watches a person they haven't seen in 3 years, but never stopped thinking about. Not warmly, not coldly, just honestly. The way you look at someone when too much has happened for expression to do it justice. Cole's voice came out low. Shade. Cassidy said, Commander. The word landed in the tent like something dropped from a height. Sutton actually took half a step back. Cole held her gaze for a moment that felt like it had weight and mass and edges. Then he looked at her forearm. The tattoo, the same mark he had seen on 3 debriefing documents that still lived behind an access level Sutton would never reach in his career. He looked at it the way a man looks at something he wasn't sure he'd ever see again, with the particular expression of someone reconciling proof with memory. You were supposed to check in through official channels, he said. I sent the invitation confirmation to your office 2 weeks ago. I know. I got it. He paused. I thought you might not actually come. Rex earned this, she said simply. I wasn't going to let paperwork decide whether he got to see it. Cole exhaled. Then he turned to Harker, and the shift in his face was not dramatic. It didn't need to be. It was just clear. The way a tide is clear when it changes direction. How long has she been standing in this tent? He asked. Harker kept his voice even. Approximately 40 minutes, sir. The credential wouldn't scan. The canine chip returned a restricted flag. Protocol required secondary verification. 40 minutes, Cole said. Yes, sir. Handler Shade and Wraith 1 have been standing in a screening tent for 40 minutes. Harker said nothing this time. Cole looked at Sutton. What did you say to her at the gate? Sutton's throat moved. I explained that pets weren't permitted past the checkpoint, sir, before I had context. He called Rex a pet, Cassidy said. Not vindictively, just accurately. Something moved behind Cole's eyes. Not rage, something older than rage. Get Reeves and the canine unit commander to the field, he said to the aide who had followed him in. Tell them we have a legacy observer requesting field demonstration access. Use the full designation. He glanced back at Cassidy once. Both of them. The aide left fast. Cole turned back to Harker and Sutton. When he spoke, his voice had the quality of something very controlled doing a great deal of work to stay that way. Do you know what program she came out of? Harker said, The credential listed a classified unit, sir. We didn't have access to the specifics. No, Cole said, you didn't. But here's what you did have access to. You had a handler standing in front of you whose dog sat on command and held it for 40 minutes without a sound. You had a credential that cleared every format requirement except a digital tag, which hasn't been mandatory for legacy classifications. You had a tattoo that matched the insignia on that harness, which should have told you that whatever you were looking at, it was consistent. You had all of that, and you still put her in a screening tent. He let that sit for exactly as long as it needed to. That's not protocol failure. That's a perception failure. And that's the one I can't fix with paperwork. Sutton stared at the floor. "Step outside," Cole said. "Both of you. You're relieved from this post pending formal review." They moved, quickly and quietly, the way people move when there's nothing left to argue. The tent was suddenly very still. Just Cole, Cassidy, Rex, and the tech who looked like he was trying to become furniture. Cole turned back to Cassidy, and the formality softened by 1 precise degree. Not much. Just enough to be human. "I read the file they finally unsealed last year," he said. "South Harbor and the 2 operations before it." "Then you know more than I do," she said. "Mine is still sealed." "Most of it," he said. "There were 2 pages they released. Your commendation citation and the post-operation field assessment." He paused. The assessment said you and Rex completed a joint extraction under 0 visibility conditions with a handler injury that should have ended the mission in the first hour. He looked at her arm. Not the tattoo this time, just her arm. "Both of you came back." "We always came back," she said. Rex stood up without being told. He pressed against her left knee, and she dropped her hand to his back again. That same flat, deliberate contact. Cole watched them for a moment. Then he said, "The dog graduating today, the lead canine in Echo class. His handler trained under Instructor Beale. Beale trained under a program that used your field protocols as foundational doctrine. The commands, the contact system, the silence discipline." He looked at Rex. "Everything they're doing out in that field today, they learned from a methodology that came from you and him." Cassidy didn't respond right away. She looked down at Rex, who was looking at the tent entrance, toward the field, toward the ceremony that had been running for the last hour without either of them. "Then we should probably go watch," she said. Cole almost smiled. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close to one. He turned toward the exit and held the tent flap open. Rex walked through first, straight and steady, his worn harness carrying that faded patch like a flag that had survived every storm it was ever flown in. Cassidy followed, and for the first time since she had reached that gate, she didn't look like someone being processed. She looked like what she was. Exactly where she was supposed to be. The field was still running when they walked out of that tent. The Echo class was mid-demonstration, a pursuit sequence, 2 handlers and their dogs moving through a controlled scenario with the kind of focused precision that came from months of repetition turned into instinct. The crowd in the bleachers was watching closely. Some were recording. Most were leaning forward without realizing it. The graduating dogs were good. Anyone watching could see that. But when Rex walked onto the perimeter grass beside Cassidy, 3 of the older canine instructors standing along the sideline turned their heads at the same moment. Not because of the noise. Rex didn't make noise. They turned because something in the air shifted, the way it shifts when a room recognizes authority it wasn't expecting. One of the instructors, a woman in her late 40s with a master training badge on her jacket, took one look at Rex's harness and walked directly to Cole. She didn't salute. She just said, very quietly, "Is that actually him?" Cole said, "Yes." She looked at Cassidy, then back at Rex. Then she stepped aside without another word and left a gap along the sideline that nobody else had vacated. It wasn't planned. It wasn't ordered. It was the particular kind of respect that doesn't come from rank. It comes from knowing the history behind the things standing in front of you. Cassidy took the spot without comment. Rex sat beside her. His amber eyes found the field and stayed there, tracking the working dogs with the attention of something that understood exactly what it was watching. In the bleachers above them, a ripple of whispers had started moving through the crowd. Someone had seen the 3 vehicles. Someone else had seen Cole walk out of the screening area with a young woman and a dog, and the kind of expression you don't put on for routine checkpoints. Phones had been going since before Cole arrived. The whispers had already become questions, and the questions were already becoming something louder. Who is she? Why did they stop the gate? That dog! Look at that dog! Something's different about that dog. Cassidy didn't look at the bleachers. Rex didn't either. On the field, the pursuit sequence ended. The lead handler brought his dog to heel, and both of them held position while the scenario assessor marked his clipboard. Clean execution. The crowd applauded with genuine appreciation, the kind that said these people understood what they were watching and respected the work behind it. Then the announcer's voice came over the field speakers. Concluding Echo Class demonstration sequence. Final presentation to follow. Field access granted for Legacy Observer demonstration. Handler designation Shade. K9, Wraith 1. Permission authorized by Base Command. The applause died immediately. Not in a rude way. In the way it dies when something unexpected replaces it, and nobody quite knows what to do with their hands. The Echo Class handlers looked at each other. One of them, the lead handler, a young man named Garrett, with his dog Cruz sitting clean at his side, looked toward the sideline and found Cassidy standing there. He looked at Rex. His face did something complicated. Recognition, trying to push through training, trying to push through surprise. And all 3 arrived at the same moment in the same expression. He had heard the designation before. Every handler in Echo Class had. Wraith 1 wasn't a name you used in the field briefings or the training manuals. It appeared in one place only. The foundational methodology document that opened every K9 program orientation packet, with a single line in the preface that most trainees read once and moved past without understanding. The contact system, silence discipline protocols, and dual-channel command structure used in this program were developed and field-tested under classified operational conditions. Original handler and asset designations remain restricted. Garrett had read that line 14 months ago, in a folding chair, on the first day of training. He had not thought about it again until this moment. Standing on a graduation field, watching a German shepherd with a worn harness patch walk to center position like he had done it 1,000 times before. Because he had. Cassidy moved without hurrying. Rex moved with her, that same measured half-stride behind her left knee. And when she reached the center of the field, she stopped and turned to face the bleachers. Rex sat. No command, no signal anyone watching could see. He just sat, perfectly square, amber eyes forward, and held it like the ground beneath him was exactly where he had always belonged. The field went quiet. Not the polite quiet of an audience waiting. The involuntary quiet of people who have just seen something that their instincts registered before their minds could process it. Cassidy reached into her cargo pocket and withdrew a collar. Black. Worn at the edges, but carefully maintained. The same dagger and triangle insignia as the tattoo on her forearm, inlaid in silver thread that caught the light once as she turned it in her hands. She knelt slowly, deliberately, both knees, and clipped it around Rex's neck. Her hands moved with the practiced ease of someone who had done this in the dark, in the cold, in conditions where every second of fumbling cost something real. Rex didn't move during the process. He kept his eyes forward and his ears up and his breathing even. Cassidy stood. She looked at Rex for exactly 3 seconds, something passing between them that was private and complete and needed no audience. Then she said one word. It was too quiet for the microphones. Nobody in the bleachers heard it, but Rex heard it, and Rex responded. One bark, not loud, not aggressive, not the bark of a dog performing for a crowd. It was the bark of a working animal acknowledging a command, short and absolute, and layered with a discipline that made the air vibrate differently than sound normally does. It rang across the field and settled into the silence that followed like a stone settling to the bottom of still water. Nobody moved for 3 full seconds. Then, a man in the 3rd row of the bleachers, civilian clothes, veteran's posture, the kind of stillness in his hands that doesn't come from civilian life, stood up without knowing he was going to. He didn't clap. He just stood. And after a moment, the woman beside him stood too. Then the row in front, then the row behind. It moved through the bleachers without any announcement, without any instruction, just person after person arriving at the same wordless understanding that something was happening in front of them that they might not fully comprehend, but absolutely should not sit through. Cole stepped to the field with a wireless microphone. He didn't look at his notes. He didn't clear his throat or adjust his collar or do any of the small preparatory things people do before public speaking. He just spoke. The dog graduating today in the lead position of Echo Class. His name is Cruz. His handler is Specialist Garrett Hale. They completed their program with a perfect precision rating and a 0-fault field assessment in the final simulation sequence. He paused. Garrett trained under instructor Dana Beal. Dana Beal trained under a methodology that was built from the ground up by a handler and a canine who ran classified operations before most of the instructors in this program had finished their first year of training. He looked at Cassidy. That handler is standing on this field right now, and that canine is the dog beside her. He let that sit. Wraith One is not a legend. He is not a story we tell to make training feel meaningful. He is a working animal who survived every operation he was deployed on. And he is here today because his handler believed he had earned the right to see what he helped build. Cole turned back to the bleachers. Everything Garrett knows, everything Cruz knows, everything every handler in Echo Class knows, it traces back to them. Garrett was looking at Cassidy now, with an expression that had moved entirely past surprise into something quieter and more permanent. He reached down and touched Cruz on the top of the head without looking. Cruz leaned into it. The small, automatic gesture of a handler grounding himself through his dog. "Handler Shade," Cole said, and he brought his hand up in a salute that had nothing ceremonial about it. "Welcome back to the field." Cassidy returned it with a nod. The particular nod of someone who has been saluted by people whose careers she outranked before they started. Not dismissive, not arrogant, just honest. Then from the sideline, something unexpected. Garrett Hale walked forward. Not at a command, not at a signal from anyone. He crossed the field with Cruz at his side and stopped in front of Cassidy, with the self-conscious directness of someone doing something they know they need to do and aren't sure they're doing correctly. "Ma'am," he said, "I want you to know the contact method, the way I work with Cruz, the way we communicate without commands in live scenarios. My instructor called it the Wren system. I never knew where it came from." He glanced at Rex and then back at her. "Now I do." Cassidy looked at him for a moment. Cruz looked at Rex. Rex looked at Cruz with a patience that was almost paternal. "How did the final simulation go?" Cassidy asked. Garrett blinked, surprised by the question. "Clean, ma'am. Full extraction. 0 casualties." Cruz held contact pressure the whole time? Never broke it. Cassidy looked down at Cruz, then back at Garrett. Then you learned it right, she said. Garrett stood a little straighter, not from being commanded to, from something settling inside him that had been slightly unsteady for a long time without his knowing it. Cruz sat beside Rex. 2 German shepherds, 2 generations of the same work, separated by time but connected by the precise thread of everything one pair had survived so the other could exist. Neither dog moved, neither handler spoke, and the field held that silence like it understood exactly what was standing on it. In the bleachers, the woman in the 3rd row, who had been recording on her phone, lowered it slowly. She didn't stop recording. She just lowered it. Because some things you stop watching through a screen and start watching with your whole self. Because you understand, even imperfectly, that you are not going to see this again. And in the back of the bleachers, unseen by anyone on the field, Petty Officer Bryce Sutton stood with his arms at his sides and his face doing something it hadn't done in a long time. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't proud. He was just still. Standing in the particular stillness of a person who has seen something that has permanently rearranged the furniture inside them, and is only now beginning to understand the size of what he almost turned away at a gate. The ceremony was officially over, but nobody behaved like it was. The families who had come to watch their handlers graduate stayed in the bleachers longer than protocol required, talking in low voices, watching the field where Cassidy and Rex were still standing with Cole and the Echo class. The normal post-ceremony energy, the backslapping and the photographs and the kids running toward the handlers with arms open, was still happening at the edges. But the center of gravity had shifted. Everyone could feel where it was. Cole walked Cassidy off the field himself, not as an escort, more the way you walk beside someone you haven't seen in a long time and aren't ready to stop being near yet. Rex moved at her left knee, the black collar still around his neck, the silver thread catching the light 1 stitch at a time. 3 of the senior instructors fell into step a few feet behind them without being asked. Nobody organized it. It just happened. The way things happen around people who carry a weight that others can feel without being told what it is. The unsealed portion of your file, Cole said quietly as they walked. The commendation citation. It's going to be read publicly at the next command ceremony. I want you to know that before it happens. Cassidy kept walking. I'd rather it wasn't. I know. It's not about recognition, Adrian. It was the first time she had used his name. Cole registered it with a slight shift in his posture, not quite stopping, not quite turning, just a small, involuntary acknowledgement that they were speaking now as 2 people rather than 2 ranks. It's not about recognition for them either, he said. It's about the program understanding where it came from. There are 42 handlers in active rotation right now, using doctrine that traces directly to your field protocols. They deserve to know the name behind what they practice every day. They deserve good training, Cassidy said. The name doesn't keep them safer. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, No, but it keeps the program honest. Rex glanced up at Cassidy once. She didn't look down, but her hand dropped briefly to his back, that flat, deliberate contact, and then lifted again. They stopped near the edge of the field, where the base exchange building created a corner of quiet away from the main crowd. Cole turned to face her properly. Behind him, the 3 instructors held their distance with the disciplined discretion of people who understood when a conversation was not for them. There's something else, Cole said. Cassidy waited. The program director, Walsh, he submitted a formal proposal 8 months ago to the Joint K-9 Command Board. He wants to redesign the second phase contact training using the full shade methodology. Not an adaptation, the complete system. The silence protocols, the dual-channel commands, the pressure mapping you developed in the field. He paused. He needs your sign-off, officially, on record. Cassidy's expression didn't change on the surface, but something moved underneath it. The particular tension of someone being asked to step back into a room they deliberately walked out of. "Walsh has been running the program for 6 years," she said. "He has. He's good." "He's excellent," Cole said. "He's also the first person to tell you that he's been working from an incomplete copy of something you finished a long time ago." Cassidy looked at Rex. Rex was watching a group of handlers 20 yards away, with the calm attention of a working dog, in an environment he had assessed and filed as safe. He wasn't restless. He wasn't anxious. He was just present. Completely and quietly present. The way he had always been, in every situation that required more than people expected. "I'll think about it," she said. Cole nodded. He knew better than to push. "That's more than I had yesterday." Then, from behind him, one of the senior instructors stepped forward. Her name was Master Sergeant Dina Park, and she had the particular bearing of someone who had spent 20 years turning raw ability into reliable skill. She had been standing back long enough, and something in her had apparently decided waiting was finished. "Ma'am," she said directly to Cassidy, "I want to say something, and I'm going to say it regardless of whether it's the right time, because I'm not sure there will be a better one." She didn't wait for permission. "I've been in canine instruction for 11 years. I have used the contact pressure system in every cohort I've trained. I have seen it work in conditions where nothing else did. I have seen handlers keep their dogs functional in live scenarios because of that system when every other training model would have broken the communication down." Her voice was steady, but it had something underneath it. Not emotion exactly, but the weight of 11 years of evidence arriving at a single point. "I didn't know who built it. Today I found out. And I needed you to hear that it worked. Every time. All of it worked." Cassidy looked at her for a long moment. Park held the eye contact without flinching. "How many handlers in your cohorts had contact breaks in field simulation?" Cassidy asked. Park blinked slightly at the precision of the question. "In the first 2 years, before we fully implemented the silence protocol, we had contact breaks in roughly 30% of high-stress simulations. And after full implementation? Under 4%. Cassidy nodded once. "Then the system worked because your handlers trusted it enough to use it completely. That's on you, not me." Park opened her mouth, then closed it, then said, "You are exactly what the file said you were." Cassidy almost smiled. Almost. "What did the file say?" Impossible to compliment directly. This time Cassidy did smile. Small and brief and entirely genuine, gone before it fully arrived, but real. Cole watched it happen, and something in his expression settled, like a tension he'd been carrying for the length of the morning, finally found somewhere to put itself down. Then the moment broke. From across the courtyard, moving fast with the deliberate urgency of someone carrying news they hadn't wanted to be the one to carry, Master Chief Voss appeared. She had changed back into her visitor lanyard and civilian jacket, but she was walking like neither of those things were true. She reached Cole first and dropped her voice immediately. "Harker filed a formal grievance," she said, 20 minutes ago. "He's claiming the gate review process was bypassed and that the field access authorization violated standing ceremony protocol. He's citing the lack of a digital credential verification as grounds to challenge the commander override." The silence that followed had an edge to it. Cole's face didn't move. "He filed a grievance." "Against the access authorization, yes." He's not naming Handler Shade directly. He's framing it as a procedural challenge to the credential bypass. "He's embarrassed," Park said flatly. "He's protecting his record," Voss said. "There's a difference." Not much of one, Park replied. Cole was quiet for 3 full seconds. When he spoke, his voice had the quality of something that had made a decision and was now simply executing it. Pull the full gate footage from this morning, both checkpoint cameras and the secondary screening tent. I want a complete timeline document from the moment Handler Shade arrived at the gate to the moment she walked onto the field. Every interaction, every word. He looked at Voss. Send it to base legal with a cover note from my office. And tell Harker's division commander that if he wants to discuss procedural compliance, my schedule has an opening at 0600 tomorrow morning. Voss almost smiled. Yes, sir. And Voss, she stopped. Thank you for recognizing her at the tent. Voss looked at Cassidy. Something passed between the two women. Not warm and not cold. The acknowledgement of two people who had each spent time in places that don't get discussed at graduation ceremonies. I almost didn't, Voss said. The patch is more faded than I remembered. 4 years in the storage box will do that, Cassidy said. You kept it in a storage box? I kept Rex in a house with a yard, and a dog bed, and a bowl with his name on it, Cassidy said. The harness was in a box. She glanced down at Rex, who was now watching Boss with a calm assessment of a dog that had decided she was trustworthy approximately 3 minutes ago. He didn't need it until today. Voss looked at Rex for a long moment. Then she crouched down, slowly, and held out the back of her hand the way people do when they know dogs and respect them enough not to assume. Rex leaned forward and touched his nose to her knuckles. One contact. Clean and complete. Voss stood back up. Her eyes were slightly brighter than they had been. She didn't say anything about it. She just straightened her jacket and turned back toward the administrative building. Cole watched her go. Then he turned and saw something that nobody else had noticed yet, because everyone else had been watching Voss. Petty Officer Bryce Sutton was crossing the courtyard. Not in uniform now. He had changed into a plain t-shirt and jeans, and he was carrying 2 cups of coffee from the base exchange window, with the careful grip of a person trying to hold something fragile without looking like they know it's fragile. He was heading toward the corner table near the exchange building, toward the spot where Cassidy and Rex had stopped walking. Cole watched him approach. Sutton saw Cole watching and slowed for just a moment, then kept walking. That small hesitation, the seeing of the authority and choosing to keep moving anyway, said more about Bryce Sutton than anything he had done or said all morning. Cole stepped aside, deliberately, making the path clear. Sutton reached Cassidy and stopped 2 feet away. He held out one of the cups. I didn't know how you take it, he said, so I got it black. You can add whatever you want at the counter. Cassidy looked at the cup, then at him. Rex looked at him too, with the quiet, sustained attention of a dog that has already decided, but hasn't announced it yet. Sit down, Cassidy said. Sutton sat across from her, both cups on the table between them, his hands folded in a way that looked deliberate, like he had practiced not fidgeting on the walk over. I'm not here to make excuses, he said. I want to be clear about that first. Good, Cassidy said. I made a call based on what I saw, and I was wrong about what I was seeing. I was wrong before I had all the information, and I stayed wrong even after I had enough information to know I should stop. He met her eyes with the directness of someone who had decided that looking away was the one thing he couldn't afford right now. That's not a protocol problem, I know that. That's something in me that I have to fix. Cassidy picked up the coffee. She held it without drinking it, just held it, looking at him with the particular evaluation of someone who has been lied to by more polished people than this and knows the difference. How long have you been in? She asked. 14 months. And before today, what was the hardest call you had to make at the gate? He thought about it honestly, which she gave him credit for. Turning back a family with an invalid wristband? Kid was crying. Parents were angry. Did you hold the line? Yes, ma'am. Good. That was the right call. She set the cup down. This morning was also about holding the line. You just drew it in the wrong place. Sutton absorbed that without defending himself, which was the right thing to do, and harder than it looked. Rex stood up slowly from beside her feet. He walked around the side of the table, 3 measured steps, and sat directly in front of Sutton. Not confrontationally, not with any aggression, just present, looking at him with those amber eyes that had looked at harder things than a petty officer having a difficult morning, and found them manageable. Sutton looked back at Rex. His throat moved. He's not angry, Cassidy said quietly. He never is. He just reads people. He's been doing it his whole life. She watched Rex watching Sutton. He doesn't hold on to things. That's one of the things he taught me. Sutton looked at her. What did he teach you first? She thought about it. The field table between them went quiet. The noise of the dispersing ceremony continued at a distance. Families and handlers, and the normal sound of a base returning to its regular shape after something unusual had passed through it. That the mission doesn't care how old you are, she said. It cares whether you're ready. Sutton stayed at that table longer than he had planned to. He didn't have anywhere urgent to be. His post was gone, at least for today, and the formal review that Cole had ordered wouldn't begin until the following morning. He had the particular freedom of a person whose scheduled certainty had been removed and replaced with open time they didn't know what to do with. So he sat, and Cassidy let him sit. And Rex stayed in front of him with that steady amber attention that asked nothing and offered everything. At some point, Cassidy drank her coffee. Sutton drank his. Neither of them rushed toward the next thing. Can I ask you something? Sutton said. You can ask. The first operation. The file I'll never be cleared to read. He chose his words carefully, like a man who had learned something about the cost of imprecision in the last 6 hours. How old were you? Cassidy was quiet for a moment, not hesitant, just deciding how much of the true answer was the right answer. 19, she said. Sutton absorbed that. 19. He thought about what he had been doing at 19 and felt the comparison land with a weight he didn't try to deflect. And Rex? 2 years old. She looked at Rex. He was faster than anything I'd ever worked with. Quieter. He could hold a position for 4 hours without a sound and come out of it ready to work like the clock had never moved. She paused. The first night we deployed together, I was more afraid than I had ever been in training. I didn't show it, but he knew. He always knew. Her voice stayed level. He pressed against my knee in the dark, just held it there. Didn't move, didn't make a sound. Just said, in the only language he had, I'm here. Whatever this is, I'm here. She set her cup down. I've never been that afraid since. Not because the work got easier, because I knew he would always tell me the truth about the room we were in. Sutton looked at Rex. Rex looked back at him. And in that sustained amber gaze, Sutton felt something he couldn't have named out loud, but would carry in him for the rest of his career. The particular humility of understanding that the most significant things in a room are not always the loudest, or the largest, or the most decorated. I called him a pet, Sutton said. Not to Cassidy, mostly to himself. You didn't know, Cassidy said. That's not an excuse. No, she agreed. It's not. But it's a reason. There's a difference. She looked at him directly. The excuse is what people say when they want the mistake to go away. The reason is what you understand when you decide the mistake is going to change something. She held his gaze. Which one is it for you? Sutton answered without hesitating. The second one. Rex stood. Not because anything had changed in the immediate environment, not because a command was given. He stood with the slow, deliberate movement of an animal that has completed something and knows it. And he walked back around the table and returned to Cassidy's side. One shoulder against her knee. Contact reestablished. Sutton watched it happen and understood, clearly and finally, that what he was looking at was not a woman and her dog. It was a system, a language, a partnership that had been built in darkness and maintained across years and was still, right now, fully operational, completely intact. He stood up, picked up both empty cups, looked at Cassidy one last time with the expression of a young man who has been handed a lesson that arrived too hard and too fast, but landed exactly where it needed to. "Thank you," he said, "for not making me feel worse than I already did." Cassidy looked at him evenly. "You did that yourself. That means you're capable of the other thing, too." He nodded, walked away. And he walked differently than he had that morning. Not ashamed, not crushed, just recalibrated. A man whose internal instruments had been reset to a more honest frequency. Cassidy watched him go for a moment. Then Cole appeared at the edge of the courtyard, and behind him, moving with the efficient stride of someone who had been looking for the right moment for the last 30 minutes, was Program Director Walsh. Walsh was in his early 50s, compact and direct with the manner of someone who had spent decades in rooms where getting to the point was a professional virtue. He stopped in front of Cassidy and didn't offer a hand. He offered something rarer. He offered the specific respect of someone who knows they are standing in front of a peer. "I've been running an incomplete version of your system for 6 years," he said. "I want to run the whole thing." Cassidy studied him. "You read the unsealed methodology document?" "3 times. The first time I thought it was theoretical. The second time, I realized it had all been field tested. The third time, I understood why the results in our second phase training have never fully matched the performance data from the original program." He paused. "We've been working from a translation. I want the original text." Behind Walsh, Cole stood with his hands clasped behind his back, not intervening, not pushing, just present as someone who had brought 2 people to the same table and understood his job was finished. Cassidy was quiet. Rex's shoulder was still against her knee, and she felt his breathing, slow and even. The breathing of a dog that was not anxious. The breathing of a dog that trusted the person above him to make the right call. "There are elements of the full system that require a level of handler commitment your program may not currently ask for," she said. "Tell me what they are." "The silence protocol in Phase 3 requires handlers to go 12 hours in a live simulation environment with no verbal commands at all. No signals, no touch. Pure contact pressure and pre-established pattern reading." She let that land. "Most handlers break before 8 hours. Not because they can't do it. Because they don't trust themselves enough to believe the dog can do it without their voice." Walsh didn't flinch. "How do we fix that?" "You build the trust before you build the skill," she said. "The current program teaches technique first. That's backwards. Rex and I spent the first 3 months of our training doing nothing except learning how each other moved, how each other breathed, how each other processed uncertainty." She looked at Walsh steadily. "You have to know your dog the way you know your own hands before you ask either of you to work in the dark." Walsh was quiet for exactly the right amount of time. Not defensive, not rushing to agree, actually thinking about it. "How long would it take to redesign the first phase?" he asked. That depends on how willing you are to slow down before you speed up. I've been running a program that performs at 96%, Walsh said. You're telling me the missing 4% is in the foundation? I'm telling you the missing 4% is the difference between a handler who functions under pressure and a handler who leads under pressure. Both survive. Only one of them brings everyone home. The silence between them had the quality of a door being opened rather than closed. Sign the authorization, Walsh said. Let us build it properly. Whatever you need to be involved as much or as little as you want. Consultant, architect, observer. You set the terms. Cassidy looked at Rex one more time. He had turned his head slightly, not toward Walsh, not toward Cole, but toward the field. Toward the space where Echo Class had graduated an hour ago. Toward the ground where Cruz and Garrett had stood at heel with 4% less than the full inheritance. I'll sign it, she said. Walsh exhaled once, the contained exhale of a man who had been holding a question for 8 months and had just received the answer he needed. He reached into his jacket and produced a single, folded document. Authorization form, already prepared, already dated, with one signature line at the bottom. Cassidy looked at it. Then she looked at Walsh. You brought the form, she said. I was optimistic, he said. Cole made a sound that was almost a laugh. Cassidy signed it. Quick and clean. The signature of someone who has made a decision and does not perform making decisions. Walsh took it back, folded it, returned it to his jacket with the careful deliberateness of someone securing something genuinely important. He looked at her one last time. The handlers who train under the complete system, he said. They'll know where it came from. Make sure they know it came from the dogs first, Cassidy said. We just learned how to listen. Walsh nodded. Then he left. Cole watched him go. For a moment, it was just the two of them and Rex, standing in the quiet that the ceremony had left behind, in the air that still carried the faint echo of that single bark from center field, the bark that had brought a bleacher full of strangers to their feet without a word of explanation. Harker's grievance, Cassidy said, won't survive the footage review, Cole said. He knows it. He filed it to have something on record. It'll be dismissed inside a week. And Sutton? Cole considered. That one's going to be fine, he said quietly. The ones who can still be embarrassed by their own mistakes, they're almost always fine. Cassidy nodded. Rex pressed his shoulder into her knee once, that small, deliberate contact, and she looked down at him. He looked back up at her with the amber eyes that had been looking at her in the dark and the cold and the impossible and the ordinary for 3 years. And she understood, as she always did when he looked at her that way, that there was nowhere she was supposed to be other than exactly here. She clipped the leash back onto his collar, the black one, the one with the silver thread, the one she had carried in her cargo pocket across the distance between who she used to be and who she had walked in here as today. They moved toward the main gate together, the same gate that had tried to turn them back that morning, the same checkpoint, the same 2 lanes and 3 cameras, and the institutional certainty that what it couldn't scan, it couldn't admit. The replacement officers saw them coming and stepped aside without being told. Rex walked through without looking at them. Cassidy walked through without looking back. And when the base fell behind them and the open road opened ahead, she did not feel like someone who had won something. She felt like someone who had completed something. The distinction mattered. Winning required an opponent. What she and Rex had done today had nothing to do with opposition, and everything to do with truth. The truth that earned things do not expire, that real service does not require a barcode, and that the most dangerous thing you can do at any gate, in any institution, in any uniform, is to look at what's standing in front of you and decide you already know what it is. Rex had known, from the first moment they walked into that checkpoint, that the gate would open. He had sat and held and waited, with the absolute patience of an animal that has never confused noise with authority or age with irrelevance. He had simply been what he had always been, completely, without apology, without performance, without asking anyone's permission to be that. He had not come here to be recognized. He had come here because the work he helped build was graduating today, and some things deserve a witness. He was the best one for the job. He always had been. And that was never going to change, no matter how long a credential sat without a barcode, no matter how many gates tried to hold the past in a secondary screening tent. What Rex and Cassidy Marin had built together in classified darkness had already survived everything the world knew how to throw at it. One checkpoint was never going to be the thing that stopped it. The mission does not care how old you are. It only cares whether you are ready. They were ready the day they started. They were ready today. They would be ready every day this work continued without them. In every handler who learned to listen before they learned to command. In every dog who pressed a shoulder into a knee in the dark and said, without a single word, "I am here, whatever this is. I am here." That was the inheritance. That was the whole thing. And it was already in the hands of people who would carry it forward into ground that Cassidy and Rex would never see, doing work that would never carry their names, keeping people alive who would never know to say thank you. It was enough. It had always been enough. It was exactly what they came for. If this story moved you, drop your city in the comments right now. Tell us, have you ever been turned away from something you had already earned? And has anyone ever seen you clearly after a long time of being invisible? Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a story like this one. Share it with someone who understands what real service looks like. And if you are still here, still watching, that tells me everything I need to know about you. Same time tomorrow, I will be here.